2023. Thank you to any live stream viewers for your patience as we wrapped up our last meeting. I will invite you again to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Item 1.03, Board Recognition. The Maplewood Richmond Heights School District would like to acknowledge that we are living and learning on the traditional land of several Indigenous peoples, both past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people of these Indigenous communities and the relationship that exists between the people and the land. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory. We respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather. Maplewood and Richmond Heights lie within the Indigenous lands of the Kickapoo, Kakaskia, Osage, Maiamia, Ojibwa, Quapaw, and the Oceti-Sakowin. I will note in board docs that linked is an animated video collaboration which tells a tale that originated with the Maiamia and Peoria tribes. The video was created by student musicians Silas Tanner and Cece Rayburn, student narrator Dakota Colbert, music teacher Vince Rapini, and staff member Lizzie Martinez. I encourage you not to watch now, but at your convenience. Item 1.04, Public Forum. Do we have any speakers tonight? Thank you, Madam Secretary. Move on to 2.01. May I get an approval and a second of the consent agenda? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.01, with the vacancy of the former vice president seat, I will now invite nominations to appoint a new vice president to the MRH Board of Education. Please note that an individual board member can hold more than one board office concurrently, and that the board will conduct its annual reorganization after the April election, at which time all offices will be open for reappointment. I will accept nominations.
Move to nominate Rachel Goldsman as vice president.
Do I have any other nominations? Hearing no further nominations, we will now close nominations. Rachel Goldsman will serve as vice president of the Board of Education by acclamation. Thank you, Rachel. Item 4.01 are construction change orders with Mr. Holzer.
Good evening. My name is Chris Holzer, CFO, Maplewood Richmond Heights School District. This evening we have change orders 36, 7, 8, and 9 before you. 36 is brought back from last month so that we can make sure the paperwork is duly approved by the board, not just the numbers therein. We have some reasonably minor changes here to the Jim Chase walls, the top of the walls on the roof to join the two buildings together to allow for expansion between the two separate buildings. Some storage fees, revisions to our ADA ramps on the west side of the cafeteria. The rest of the list is before you. These are all relatively similar and have been communicated to the board in prior board memos. Are there any questions?
No questions. Item 4.02, the Maria J. Langston Administration Building renovation bids. Just wanted to say that full title.
Okay, so this evening we have before you the results of the public bid opening that Dr. Dietrich and I conducted this morning. We had 3 bidders. We had Crestline Construction Services, Legacy Construction Services, and A. Eilers Construction Services. The numbers are there before you. Our intent is in the coming days to bring each of the contractors in for interviews. We'll thoroughly interview and review the bids that they proposed and ask them all of the appropriate questions. At that time, we'll be forming the recommendation and bringing that to you on the December 7th board meeting, at which time we'll have a fleshed out budget with all expenses, including FF&E, which is furniture and equipment. Dr. Dietrich, do you have anything to add?
I would just say a quick update is we proposal for exterior renovations was approved and is in consideration.
Wonderful.
So we're all really looking forward to getting started on this project. Our intent is the beginning of the fiscal year, which for us in schools is July, that perhaps this meeting will be held in our new public meeting space in that new building. And Dr. Dietrich and I will be collaborating to manage the project as we move through the process.
So to confirm, we'll have the full bid packages to review and discuss at our work session in early December.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question. So the questions that you're going to ask, is it possible for us to get a copy of those before you ask them in case we have any questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Just as a point of order, is this something that we would normally look at? Or, I mean, would we normally have input in bidding or not? If not, then maybe I'm asking you to do work there.
So not in the evaluation of the bid packages. You don't, if you want to review the questions, you can. One of the questions that I shared with Chris that I wanted to ask is how many minority employees or employees that they have either in their subs or the company that actually submitted a bid. So we can share the questions, but as far as evaluating the actual bids, no. You can see how they're actually scored.
Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, thanks. Item 4.03, new job description for summer school administrative intern by Dr. Ambers Phillips.
Good evening, members of the board. I am here to present a new job description for study only for the summer school administrative intern position. This position is essentially for K-12 education for summer school. Previously, our assistant principals served in a rotating basis to support summer learning for MRH. This position actually is going to support in the planning and preparation and hosting of the summer journey. So, currently, MRH is relatively a flat organization, so there are not many opportunities for individuals with an administrative degree to be able to pursue opportunities for learning and leadership. And this role develops a pipeline for our teachers to be able to step into these roles, and so it grows the talent in our district. And so I wanted Dr. McGee to also share with you a little bit about the allocation. This position has a salary of $42.90 that is commensurate with what our summer school teachers actually make, and so we wanted to make sure this position did not disincentivize for individuals an opportunity to take it by individuals losing funding or money if they stepped into this leadership role. So he's going to talk a little bit more about the allocation piece. And if you notice, for our strategic plan for our people, it is explicitly stated in our strategic plan goals under this section for personal growth and development, what this position would essentially be able to do for our staff members.
Yeah, the financing for this position will come out of the funds generated last year and will allow us to continue to provide funding through the average daily attendance of our summer school program. So what we looked at in our summer school program evaluation last year was to create a new model, and part of that new model is proposing this new position that would work with myself and Dr. Bouchard to oversee the program, to ensure we have a consistent voice and vision for the program, and be a sort of on-site, everyday supporting teachers, supporting kids, calling families, making sure they get them there, and have that opportunity to get some leadership experience while also supported by our current administration, as well as through Dr. Bouchard and I in the setting up of the program.
Any questions?
I have a question. So in past years, the assistants, admins, principals of the buildings worked summer school. Is that still the case and we're adding this, or is the whole program changing and therefore this is just a different model that we're working from? And I did hear that this is not any new money, this is money that was raised from last year's summer school. I want to make that a point. And in the past, when summer school has happened, was that an extra duty contract, or was that just part of someone's role and responsibility? It's a five-pronged.
I worked them all down.
I'll try to respond to as many of them as I can. If I miss one,
I'll jump in
please
too.
just jump in. In the past, our administrative position, summer school position was held by the assistant principals in the building. So the assistant principals of all of the buildings helped to support summer school. There was a lead assistant principal who was in charge. He was primarily the liaison for summer learning, and then on a rotating basis, the other assistant principals, and that was Dr. Maxwell in the past couple of summers, but individuals from the Early Childhood Center, Ms. Stansel, Mrs. Blair from the elementary building, and then also I believe that there was support also from the high school building potentially, but I know that for the most part, the three of those individuals really did on a rotating basis ensure that coverage was present. This was not an additional stipend that they received, and what was the other question?
It was, has the model changed?
So yes, the model has changed. This provided an opportunity for, I sent a survey out just to see how many individuals had principal certifications and admin degrees. There are several people in our organization that have degrees and would like experiences to be able to step into some roles to get some administrative experience and leadership experience to prepare them for pipelines here in MRH, or potentially for other positions of leadership, even if it's not an assistant principal. So it allows them to be able to lead in a different way. So it certainly is a different model.
And I think we saw last year that we had record numbers of enrollment, record numbers of involvement, record numbers of revenue. We're doing something differently, and with that we need to look at our leadership and support a little differently. So I think we've got a great opportunity with this position to provide not only the growth opportunity, but new levels of support and growth from our leadership development pipeline.
And having one person, one central person, and I think we have done a phenomenal job, so let me just say that. I definitely think Dr. Maxwell did a great job of facilitating summer learning, but it allows him to be able to do different things during the summer, and the other assistant principals as well, which I think he would enjoy. And I think it provides those opportunities for our staff members. Other districts have a similar model, not all, but several. It's not something that is not unique in other areas as well, so you would see.
And can you remind us what was different about Summer Journey that enabled us to generate revenue from our summer program?
First of all, we offered it as free as a shift from a tuition-based services, which, because we were able to do that, then we were able to submit to the state for reimbursement for average daily attendance. So basically, when a kid showed up, we were able to support them. We were able to provide academic enrichment and intervention. And just like we would in a traditional school year, we are reimbursed based on our average daily attendance. This is a different model than we've done in the past. It feels more like school than camp. That's the shift.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4.04 is a new course proposal for a middle school seed to table program. Mrs. Breed Parks.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Breed Parks. Well, I've been the seated table garden coordinator at the middle school since 2011. And so just with changes in our school, there needs to be some changes in the program. So I'm here to highlight how I propose that could go. First of all, to refer to our district plan, the proposal is to have a middle school semester-long course that will engage students in authentic life skills to provide for their physical needs. And they will be introduced to career pathways in food and agriculture. And it will be a project-based hands-on learning course that will also fill a missing niche in the middle school course offerings. So this would be a course description for the handbook for enrollment. It's a semester-long course where students will engage in experiences in gardening and cooking, Students will learn the basics of planting, growing, and harvesting food crops. They will learn to read and follow recipes and the techniques required to safely prepare food. Why don't we have this course already? I'll just explain. For the first many years that I was here, it was Seed to Table was a guaranteed curriculum for kindergarten through 8th grade students. And in the middle school level, we did that as integration into their core classes. I was a 3/4 time teacher, or Seed to Table garden coordinator when I started. And so we taught, as part of our expeditionary learning model, we taught interdisciplinary standards from their courses using the garden as the platform for that. And it worked very well. And then I became a certified teacher and had classes of my own during the school day, and it became challenging. There were constraints to mainly time, because I couldn't be in 2 places at once. And there was just some other difficulties, block scheduling, and a lot of just kind of clunky things that weren't working. And so we realized that actually other specials that went through 6th grade became electives at the middle school level, like music and art. People would choose those. It wasn't a guaranteed curriculum, and that the Seed to Table could follow the same model. Another small thing that has shifted is that with the shift to Chartwell's, the food service company, we can't serve the food that the students have grown in the cafeteria because of procurement and their guidelines. And as a for-profit company, we would be donating food, so that doesn't really work. And so now there's kind of a gap in that the student body doesn't get to enjoy the farm-to-table food that they've grown. And so this would also kind of provide a pathway to bring that back in where the students get to eat and enjoy the things that they've grown in their garden. We did a survey. 83% of the middle school, of the 123 respondents, said they wish they had more elective courses. 55% were very interested in a course where they learned to cook. And 60% wanted more opportunities for hands-on learning and spending time in nature. We do have spaces, so this is the new teen kitchen, which is right off of the cafeteria. Currently used not for a regular class, but a few different components. Actually, CVBI is using it to prepare coffee for their coffee cart. And WOW is currently utilizing this space to pack their boxes, but they don't need that. Once the construction is finished, I believe they have another space. And they don't need the sinks and the other appliance utilities, they just need space and cabinetry. So otherwise it will also be used for club days at the middle school level, and then it's used for food processing and storage for other things, like for Adventure Club. It could be processed for our food and our honey that we grow, we raise. And of course our gardens. So they are already still cooking along, doing great. The proposal does include a few upgrades, because there really hasn't been any infrastructure upgrades in particularly the middle school garden, which is around the New Visions house, in 10 years. Just some notes on the shifts from in my day, that I would be having more classroom contact time and less Seed to Table integration time. Although I do hope that some of the really signature integrations that we've built continue, like right behind you, you see the seed library. We just started working on that for Calmar's class. So hopefully those are established enough that they can continue some of these integrations with the other middle school courses that are existing. So here we are on the timeline. There's would be some curriculum writing hours for this summer to actually write the course. And then, of course, a cycle of improvement yearly to make sure it's still working. And budget. So for initial first year costs, I think around $8,000, which would include, we thought maybe we could use some cookbooks or resources in case something shifts, that we have a physical something for students to refer to. Like, here's some recipes, here's some garden techniques. We don't have any of those materials. So that would be one. The kitchen is already, the teen kitchen is already pretty well stocked, but we'll need a few more things as we kind of build out what we're going to be learning and making. And then professional development, possibly FACS certification, which I don't need as a middle school teacher, but would probably be very valuable anyways. And just the summer curriculum writing. And then the garden, like I said, really hasn't had any upgrades. The shed could use some maintenance and paint. The seating is kind of, it's been a long time since we've had any physical upgrades in the garden for those structures. And then annual costs would be food and disposables like dish soap and sponges and food storage, plastic bags, stuff like that, and then food, which it was a little bit, what we estimated was, okay, $3 per student for maybe half of the semester is a cooking day and half is a garden day. So we thought, oh, 22 days per semester would be cooking, and we estimated maybe that there would be 36 students. So that's how we got to the number of $47.50 a year for the kind of consumables. And then if there would need to be like a summer curriculum revision next summer, or each year. So there you have it. It's a middle school, it's a semester-long exploratory course. The crops grown and food prepared would be seasonal, so it would be a project-based format. So the project would change based on seasonality. But the standards would be, there would be set standards from Missouri, DESE, from agriculture and FACTS programs. And so there would be the set ones that, okay, will be taught and assessed each semester, but how and when would rotate, would be different seasonally. And we already have the staff, facilities to offer this course. And then we just need the budget to get started and the approval to green light and go for it.
I have a question. How does the price of this class compare to other electives? Do you know by chance?
Oh, yeah, I'm not school budget lady. I don't
I'm not either, so I thought.
I can at least say from startup, it's very similar to what we did last year with the creativity and technology course. That had a considerable amount of startup cost with iPads and all the technology, the little bits and things that went into it. The difference with this course is the fact that it does have a continual yearly annual commitment because it does cost money to go buy flour, go buy sugar, to make sure that we've maintained the mixers, things like that. So that's the difference, where we would potentially have a one-time cost for last year's course. This will have a continuing cost.
So, you guys, just me? Okay. I have a question. As you're formulating this curriculum, how is it going to fit in with our basically our strategic plan? Like, what is this going to do to sort of forward what we're trying to do as a district?
Just can you go back to that first, I think the first slide. There we go. So from the goals for our students, equip all students with the flexibility and adaptability to be successful in an ever-changing world, create relevant, thought-provoking, authentic learning experiences that engage all students. From what I've surveyed from those both highly engaging and definitely authentic learning experience that's directly tied to career pathways and just we eat, we need to live. And then empowering all students to design those personalized pathways for the future. So I think a good fit actually for our students from the goals for our district.
Well, I guess what I'm really asking is, what this curriculum, is it also going to have like a writing component? Is it going to have like a math component for, the cost of supplies?
Oh yeah, sure. And we've talked about, I've met with the other seated table teachers on some of these things, like, for instance, recipe doubling, halving, those kinds of things. Really hands-on, okay, these are things that we need to know, and here's why. Here's the actual practical hands-on, how to read a recipe, how to, all those, yes, exactly, those math pieces.
It also aligns to, for our resources, for our sustainability efforts is a huge part of that. So there is some overlay in that area as well.
And our district vision regarding stewardship and our commitment to sustainability and growing our own food.
And health, when the program started, it's my understanding, just a few years actually before I came, is that it was started as a health initiative, that the kids are more likely to eat vegetables that they grow, and it was grants from the Missouri Foundation for Health that actually started the garden programs. So just aligning with that and okay, this is also a health initiative. So,
Grants out there. Have we explored grants? You mentioned Missouri Foundation for Health. Have we explored whether there are any grants to support the new edition of the course?
No,
That's
not at
something
this
I would.
time.
that's something I would encourage.
We write a lot of grants. That was not one we have written this year.
I know, but I know that there are some
We'll work on that.
additional.
I simply know of some
grants.
garden-based ones that are available. I'm less familiar with the cooking-based ones.
If we have a seats to tables course for the middle schoolers, will we have like one for high schoolers? Like, I don't know.
Good question. Yeah, that's been, would love to see that happen.
Yeah, I will add that our, on the sort of backside of our website, the district internal web pages, we have clearly outlined what the opportunities are for students, staff, to propose new courses. There is a timeline for that that's been published. It's been communicated through our Teaching and Learning Council. So all it takes is motivation. And as soon as we've got somebody with a vision, there's a clear step-by-step process that I work through with them, with checklists and checkpoints, and we always have the deadline of this board meeting annually every year. Because after the approval, there are a myriad of steps for this course to be approved, for it to make it into Power School, for it to be available for students, and that is a long runway that we need. So anything that we're looking to propose, we always come up with it now or anytime, really, because the form is live and kicks off anytime somebody accesses it, and we have to have it by this board meeting annually.
So Abraham, find you a sponsor.
That's right.
And a teacher who's interested, and you probably could get something going.
Absolutely.
And I just have one more question. It's, Dr. McGee, when you do propose these new curriculums, like how much integration with the other programs that we already have is going on? Because, I see opportunities for people that are engaged in like shop, painting, building things, the audio vision people for, watching them take down the recipes, all of this. Like, I feel like there could be, the people that are in the core class for the seat at the table, but, people in high school that could go and be like, what are you kids doing,
That's the dream, right? Like, when we're truly highly functioning as an organization, we see things like our marketing class doing things for our clubs and our organization. That's what we want to see happen. That's the vision and the direction of where we're going. Like, there's no reason for our science and our biology courses to not be partnering with our seed to table and our expertise in our garden to make those things happen. And that's where we want to go.
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
How would this course look in the existing schedule? Would there be any conflicts, or would you know about that in our existing schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've been meeting and looking at, okay, it will have to be scheduled in conjunction with both middle school and high school, because the teen kitchens are shared space. So CVBI is currently using it. I don't know if there's going to be an offering for the high school for like a FACS course in the future, but so that would have to be very carefully scheduled. And also, since the teen kitchen is off of the cafeteria, that's a consideration. Do we want to intentionally have it during lunch so we can serve food that we've cooked, or intentionally have it away from lunch so there won't be that distraction of students using the spaces? So yeah, excellent question.
So, thank you. I think it's a great idea. I think that the idea of cooking your own food, we got away from it for a little while, and so I think that's a great addition. I want to lean over to Dr. D just for a second and say, I thought food services was supposed to be able to connect the food that we grow. That is just a question to put in your head, and please answer it.
I can speak to that. They are very accommodating and have done, like, they had a farm to school month in October, and so I had brought in all these really long, they're called Trondoncino squash, like really long curly butternuts, and they made a squash dish, and so they're offering tasting in our cafeteria, but it's kind of like a one-off, it's like a special event. It's not like, okay, every day on the line we're going to have salad, or we're going to have something from the garden, or it's more of a, they can't serve it on the line, so it's a separate thing. It's a little bit extra, it's a little bit.
I appreciate that, but I also would like a little, because I don't remember it being presented that way, and my fellow board members will let me know. And so, because that was a big deal, is that we liked having the food being incorporated, and it's possible that it's not available to do that with their regulations, and I totally understand that, but that's why I want to, before I forget, I want to revisit that so we can hear about that, because I think that's really important. I'm curious, some of the things you proposed, I'm gonna thank you, and I'm gonna look at Chris. They seem like they shouldn't have to be in her budget. So I would be curious to find out of those things what come out of operating or are somewhere earmarked somewhere else. And then I'm going to turn to Dr. Stephanie back there and say, yeah, seriously, where are the fund grant opportunities?
There are some out there, especially out here in the city where garden spaces are limited. There are some opportunities. I have not had a chance to push out all of the grants. And opportunities out there, but there are some things out there, especially for gardening, food, opportunities for provide some so probably everyone.
And then this is a study item, correct? How do I ask this? My guess is you create this and you'd want to do it, and so then we would lose her in her core. That's a further down the line, but just something to think about is we wouldn't want to lose her in her teaching abilities, but I also understand this desire to be committed to this project. And so I would want to hear a little bit more about how that might happen. So there was no question. There's really just a comment. Thank you.
We'll come back with the answers for those. Rachel, I did jot them down, and also we'll go back and look at the RFP for Chartwells to see what the description for that was, because I do recall a piece in there with seed to table we specifically looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 4.05, which is another new course proposal for Math 6-7 and 7-8 by Ms. Demesian and Ms. Weaver.
Yeah, I'm going to pitch hit. We
Okay.
had some illnesses pop up that caused me to have to step in. I will not do a great job, but I will do the best that I can at presenting these concepts. I will say that not only did Lisa and Christine do an amazing job, they've been working on this. They started this proposal this time last year, and they had been working with Ms. Elam and Dr. Dietrich and then Mr. Zitzer on this course proposal to make it to today. You'll also notice that the slides that you previewed had ample amounts of information in them getting you ready for today. So I'll breeze through some of this and give you the highlights and then accept your questions that I may know the answer to and I may need to research and come back with that to you. So this new course is developed to better meet students' needs, providing families with more options with math placement and multiple access points. And we'll talk a little bit about what those multiple access points look like. And we feel like this new courses, or this is truly two new courses, one at the elementary building and one at the middle school, will allow our kids to have the flexibility and adaptability to meet their ever-changing world in our course description. The idea here with Math 6-7 is truly to put a year and a half into a year. That's the main concept here. So looking at Math 7-8 is that other half of 7th grade and all of 8th. So truly what is traditionally called in education compacting the curriculum. The way that we would look at this is when we're into the curriculum writing process, I will work with both of them to discuss sort of the overview of what does it mean to compact the curriculum, how do we compact the curriculum, and what are the traditional steps to make that happen, which basically is really, honestly, 3 phases. One being looking at the standards that are priority that our state has outlined for us, utilizing pre-assessment data to appropriately differentiate based on the needs of the students, and then providing extension and enrichment when students are ready and available to that. So the course is basically, again, all of what we currently offer in 6th grade and half of what we currently offer in 7th grade together into one course, and then the other half of 7th grade and all of 8th in one course. The previous and proposed models are linked here. You'll notice on the left side of your screen, entirely too small for you to see from where you're seated, is that you'll notice that something happens in 3rd grade through a series of assessments, and then students are set off on 2 tracks. there's an accelerated model, and then there's the traditional grade level model. What we're proposing is sort of delaying that fragmentation and then also building in opportunities for students to shift within the track that they're on should they be identified as ready for additional engagement and enrichment. The real big key of why this is coming along is we just needed more flexibility. We needed more flexibility to identify more kids, to provide them the appropriate challenge, and give them an avenue and a pathway into the concept of Algebra 1 being available to them at the middle school. There's a process list here for identifying students for math in 6-7. Traditionally, this would be done in 5th grade. There's a note here around the accelerated math pathway wasn't originally developed as a pathway towards Algebra 1, and we have been really in their conversations with their school leaders as well as listening to the desires of our community as to finding a way to create an opportunity for kids to have Algebra 1 in 8th grade should they want it. So this is a way to specifically design a pathway for kids to be able to get there. Now, we know there will be an opportunity for kids that once this course is created for next year, that this would allow them to transition into this course. It would be available for them, and we're developing that and implementing these ways to identify kids so that way it would happen this spring and that this course would be available for them next year. If a kid is ready to go from 7-8 and into algebra as an 8th grader, there's identification process list there and look-fors associated with that. The previous pathway is here, and both Lisa and Christine have been here long enough that they've seen all the different ways, and they went into a little bit of history here that experience well before I got here, where they looked at how previously students were available for Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, and you can see it's quite a long list of things that had to happen. There were a lot of gates and obstacles to get kid there, and we're looking to remove some of those gates and obstacles. This is what then high school would look like. So now if we can shift the presentation, if you will, a little bit, what we're seeing here in the secondary level is now kids can get into algebra in 8th grade, which opens up higher level math courses available for them at the high school. Traditionally right now what we're seeing is kids will double up on math in order to get the credits that they would like to achieve by the time they graduate MRH. And while we love kids that want to take multiple math classes, we would like for that to be a little bit easier on them, so that way they're taking one at a time. So we don't have this because our accelerated model is several years old. We've had a similar model, but it didn't address the concerns at the middle school. We've seen it in other regions, other areas in our region, and want to learn more from them. And then also, we want to try and get kids into that Algebra 1. I do also note here in this rationale is that really delaying this identification provides us an opportunity to know the kids better and also align support where support is needed, because this will reallocate Ms. Weaver and potentially any other math specialists at our elementary building to provide additional support in classrooms. So she would be dedicated to the 6-7 course, but also able to push in for support on the grade level courses. We're proposing this now. We'll write curriculum over the summer, which is truly focusing on what we have already and compacting that for implementation next year. Course for this is we have all of the curriculum already written. We have all of the resources we need. The one thing we do need is time over the summer to get that all lined out. And then we also noted in here release time because we want to be able to do course corrections So I want to be able to meet with both Lisa and Christine throughout the year next year and say, okay, how's it going? What are we noticing? What are the trends? What's our data telling us? And how can we shift intelligently throughout the year and not wait till the end of the year to make adjustments as we go. And that's it. Questions that I can answer for you or write down?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I understand this is, kind of forward-looking for like kids that are going to excel in math or kids that are going to have, be able to move. But what are we going to do for those kids that maybe need some remediation? Would it be possible to have, I don't know the way to explain this, but let's say you're in 6th grade, but you're still going to be learning all the concepts that you would have learned in 5th grade to reinforce what you should have learned or could have learned, moving forward, because it's, you don't want to just push them through if they're not getting it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the biggest thing that you said that I want you to walk away with is we know that providing kids grade level experiences is the most important way to accelerate student learning. So what you noted in your proposal is that we're providing kids 6th grade content while also providing an additional support. That is the true way to catch a student up, and that's the model we're currently using. And we'll be able to provide even more of that because we're dedicating one teacher to the 6, 7 as opposed to a teacher at 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th in these really small groups.
I'll add to that. I think what you're asking is what type of interventions will we put in place for struggling students. So we've talked about having a multi-tiered systems of support coordinator, Lauren Weisler, who's working on the tiers at each level. So one thing we've been pushing, I'll use the elementary school since that's one of the schools that will be supporting that, is small group instruction and really looking at data to provide additional support and how teachers are actually reteaching the skills and concepts that students don't understand. So there are already some things in place. The elementary school has interventionists as well as our ECC to provide supports for those students. So we're not removing supports, we're looking at acceleration. And I do want to say that we talked about how do we ensure that there's diversity in the group, because that is something, if we're talking about equity, that we've been looking at. And so there is mechanisms in place for that to ensure that we are also catching those students who display talent that may need a little bit of a nudge, but we currently do have things in place now. There are opportunities for enhancement around the reteach, but that's part of what I look for when I go walking with the principals.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. Thanks for providing the resources. So as you are talking with Rockwood and Parkway School District, like what is their data? What are they saying? How long they've been doing this to ensure, what we have to prepare for here for our students at MRH?
So
I will also while we did highlight those 2 districts, I will also say that we are a part of an organization called EMPER, which is out of Mizzou, and there's some of their math faculty that has reviewed our proposal, and we're also working with Lindbergh School District as well as looking at this exact same model. So we're not doing this alone. Not only are we taking guidance, I don't have their data off the top of my head, but I will say that one of the things that is my default is I default to doing things in groups, doing things together, and building a strong network. So that's what I believe we're going to have in moving this forward.
Thank you.
Linda also put a note that we can actually pull their data to see how that's working. So what I'm hearing you ask is, what is their data for individuals who are similarly in these particular courses? So as a means, when we come back, we can present that information. And I want to be clear, also presenting it disaggregated by race and free and reduced lunch status, if we can see it. Because I do think that when we think about gifted, when we think about enrichment acceleration, ensuring that those safety nets, even for those kids who are struggling, are in place. So I think that's an excellent question for follow-up.
I have 2 questions. Actually, I'll ask them one at a time so you don't lose them. The first one is that entry point, right? So I saw there were 2 different slides, and I apologize, I didn't see them ahead of time until now. But it looked like they were kind of disjointed. One had that it was going to be testing and then also talking to teachers, et cetera, as kind of your entry point into this program. But then the other one, it had stepwise, and the first step was scoring on the testing. Which will it be, I guess? And then I have a second part to that first question, I guess, too. Yeah, because there was that, and then the second slide, it has like stepwise 1, 2, 3, and so.
This one?
Yeah, there was that, and then this next slide after it was 1, 2, or yeah, there was one, and it was, anyway, yeah, there were 2 in a row. Anyway, basically, what is it going to be, we're just going to only look at test scores, period, and then move on, or is it going to be discussing with teachers as well to really identify these students that excel?
Yeah, the intent to this is not to rely solely on a testing experience.
Yeah.
We do want to look at this holistically because, as Dr. Jamison said, we want to make sure that we look for the kids that are ready. And that readiness is going to look different than a score that is on a standardized test that's been taken on a computer. Readiness can be showed creative thinking through engagement in the classroom. There's lots of ways that we can look at readiness, and I think that's the core of this bullet pointed list.
Okay, so it's going to be more the bullet point where it's going to be that kind of inclusive all-around look. Okay, good. No, perfect. The second one is what happens to this. So if we switch to this next year, what happens to our 3-4 kids that are in this accelerated program now in these small groups? Do they just get pushed back in the classroom? Where do they go?
That I don't know. I will follow up on that one. There's not a slide on that one.
Yeah, and to that point, it would be helpful to have some data on the number of children currently being identified at 3rd grade. I'd actually like some additional data on how many 8th graders are taking Algebra 1, and it would be helpful to also put those with our current math achievement slides, just again for understanding of how the current system has produced.
I know one of the data points right off, so of the students who took algebra last year, all of them were proficient with the exception of one student. And I will be honest, I struggle, and this is my transparency, because, my wonder is, and while I love data, whether or not we are preparing students to show perseverance and grit, still showing mastery and understanding of the content, or is the goal for the students who are identified to be proficient in advance on the Algebra 1 ELC? And so we're continuing to have that conversation, because I think sometimes a student may not be a very good test taker, but is fully capable of actually applying the content or concepts that they've learned to solve a problem, but it may not necessarily show up on a standardized test. So I do think these are valid points, but the majority of the students in 8th grade, only one was not proficient or advanced.
The 8th grade students in Algebra 1.
Correct. So it would be this year's freshmen would be the ones. I think it was a small number, like 11 students. Yep.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in current data to help us understand, do we have the capacity to accommodate students in the 6-7 class? Is one teacher, given the scheduling constraints, going to be able to meet that need?
Yeah, I will say that was an early obstacle we had to overcome. When we look at this model that we're proposing, the model breaks if we have 4 kids. The model breaks if we have 8 kids. The model works great in somewhere in the 15 to 18 to 20 range. It's just, which behooves us to identify, support, provide opportunities for kids to be successful in there. Because to your point, that it just doesn't work when we have 4 kids in a room.
How many kids do we have doubling up?
Right.
Because if you have, if you've got 2 or 3 classes of kids that are doubling up, who are current sophomores, then you have more than enough kids for this to work.
Yeah. To that point, too, I appreciate that we're taking a more systematic approach to acceleration. I think we do have more kids who may be outliers on the accelerated end of things that are being identified younger and younger. I'm aware of a few kids in our ECC, which I know y'all are aware of as well, who are going to break this model next year, so I appreciate that we're getting this. I would love for us to be able to continue to figure out ways to not necessarily develop models, but also have that flexibility and that accommodation for some kiddos who don't fit into the one-size-fits-all kind of mold.
Can I piggyback on that just a second? We keep talking about this as accelerated. This is not accelerated in comparison to high schools around us.
Right.
This idea that you get to pre-calc your senior year is standard in some high schools. All schools are different and they're weighted differently, but we're calling it accelerated, but it might be norm, and I love the word flexibility, because while it's accelerated for some of our students, it's norm for others, and it's tough for others. And I want to be able to accommodate all of them, but we also have flexibility.
Katie, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So would it also be helpful to see how many students at the ECC currently transitioning in? Because I know of several of them, so maybe bringing that number back too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, at this point, I don't want to make a bigger system conversation about 3 or 4 kids, which may be what this is, but maybe this is a trend of we have more children who are coming in with some particular giftedness at the ECC, which I know is not a space where we've spent a lot of resource around the gifted, supports. So this may be a completely different topic, but just because I know that there are some particular math exceptionalities at the ECC, just that was a connection here.
One thing, as we're talking, and Rachel kind of touched on it, and as you're preparing as a parent, we got to make sure we're using the right language that I guess how's this going to be introduced to the parents on that point, because everyone talking is like accelerated, but it's really the norm, but we don't want a parent to think their child is not exceptional, this, and that, because of how they might perceive what we're trying to do. As for the more gifted children, and I just don't want parents to feel like that their child will not excel, but really they will, but just when it's explained, what would that look like, how would that message be explained to the parents, or even the students.
Take that back.
Absolutely, it's great feedback. Thank you all. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a question. So my question is, how do these math courses help improve student trajectory going into high school throughout their high school career? Because I know that adding this is the word has been mentioned, accelerated, but I did hear that this is kind of like a standard when it comes to other schools. But this possibly might be an adjustment when it comes to the high school, adding other additional higher courses for that, since we're doing that, because this is, a standard, around, but to other schools, it's not. So would that be?
Yeah, I think that goes back to kind of the earlier conversation that we had when, because we would be offering algebra at 8th grade, that allows for advanced math courses to be available for students based on sort of the prerequisites or the progression, if you will, of math. And I also think, there is a touch related to science as well, that it also opens up some doors and opportunities because of the math skills that they would have to make those available. And those, could be available to students virtually through Launch. It could be here locally through our professors and our teachers that we have here on campus. So I think this just provides another pathway.
There are no other questions. Thank you. We will go ahead and move on to item 5.01, which is our MSIP 6 update with Dr. Jameson.
Thank you. Tonight I bring, just for a quick review, an overview of where we are with our climate and culture survey. If you can recall, last year the board asked for additional surveys to be examined, and that was done through Vince Estrada. He presented that information prior to with the social emotional learning CAT and also the multi-tiered systems of support district level team. The team identified the University of Missouri Columbia survey, and I wanted to give an update of where we are on survey participation as of November 10th. Currently, we've had 258 participants to take the survey. That number is now, from family standpoint, up to 304. And the reason why I wanted to share this information with the board is to continue to look at the number of respondents and then also the actual district enrollment for those individuals that are completing the survey. So the survey is open until November 17th. We have our staff survey, 175 staff members to date have completed the survey with the 58% response rate. And those numbers break down: 77 staff members at the ECC, 41 at the elementary school, the middle school has 14, and the high school has 30 for the staff, and then central office and district office 14 total. The family survey, as I mentioned, has 304 respondents, and that's about 30% response rate. And for the students, the elementary school has a 90% response rate with 369 students. Middle school has 85%, 184 students, and the high school has 206 respondents, which is a 47% response rate. And so what we're hoping to do with the data that's received, one, try to look at what parallels exist between the previous survey to see if there are some things that actually align, but then as we continue to work to develop culture, and as I meet with the association reps and the teacher leader reps, talk about what we're doing with culture, particularly as it relates to staff. And so on our teacher leader agenda, there is always a conversation and article regarding culture and things that we can do to continue to improve. That work has already started and is continuing with partnerships with the local credit union through the work of Dr. Ambrose Phillips. But right now, here's where we are. We do encourage families. There still is an opportunity for you to complete the survey, as well as staff, so that we can respond accordingly to the data that's collected. As a reminder, this is a requirement for the Missouri School Improvement Program for us to not only survey parents, but from a database decision-making standpoint to respond to the data. And they also have us to submit how we're responding to the data, and that actually is due in January. So for each year, they're looking at what trends did you see, what patterns, which we've already presented previous year's data, and that's submitted as a part of continuous improvement for the state. Just a brief update of the climate survey that currently is out. I will welcome any questions that you may have.
So this is just highlighting how much response we've gotten from families, which looks to be fairly low as far as the number of families in the district, but I also don't know what our typical response rate has been for these sorts of things.
So I can say from the demographic standpoint, it's at par. So when we look at other surveys that have been distributed, typically the respondents are white, lower participation rate for our families of color. And so one of the things that I discussed with Vince and also Ed is, what are we doing to get the voices of the individuals who are not at the table? And thinking outside of the box for that, so that we can see how the school experience is not only impacting them, but also impacting their experience as they enter into our school spaces and their perception of that. But at this point, this is where we are, and I'm hoping, I would love to have 100% participation rate, but 258 respondents at the time of this, which was November 10th, to 304, and we pushed it out weekly. And the schools have also sent reminders to families as well.
I have a question. So I don't know if the public have, what are we doing to reach those people that are not responding?
So we were looking at a couple things. One was sending paper surveys and actually inputting the data in. One of the benefits of actually using the survey from the University of Missouri is that we can see what the response rate was. I think for the DESE survey, while convenient, it really wasn't a quick turnaround time. So you saw that we distributed the survey and it was weeks before we got the results back, and also pages of data that really wasn't user-friendly. So that's one way. We also are sending text messages to those particular families, and then we also discuss using QR codes as families pull up for drop-off and things like that. Again, this is an excellent way for our community to give voice around what's happening in our buildings, and we are responding to the data. So we invite the feedback. We want the feedback so that we can not only create a better experience for families, but also for our students and our staff.
Okay, and just a follow-up question. So is there anything that the board can do to help with any of this process?
Not really. It really, I think, the principals are putting the links and reminders in their updates that go out to families. Ed is also pushing that information out. I retweet, repost. It really is encouraging parents, and I always say silent voices don't get heard. And so oftentimes we talk about the need to actually improve, and we are responding, and we have done some things differently this year. So I thought that we would have more responses because we have made some shifts and some changes, particularly around like communication, sharing survey results, which is one that we typically see that is reflected as not happening, and we have been continuing to do that. So being able to get some feedback saying, good job, you're making progress, or this is an area where you need to continue to focus, will be much beneficial, not for only me, but also for the building leaders who are leading those buildings. I will highlight, like Mr. Zitzer is actually using last year's surveys with students. So each month they take a 4-question or so survey around sense of belonging, whether or not they feel safe, and the teachers are actually using their advisory time to talk to students about and unpack like what is safety and having an understanding. So when I meet with him, he actually shares with me, well, this month this is where the students were, this month this is where they are, and then he'll do the same when the new survey results are being used. So our teachers are using it, they are intervening on behalf of kids, and the information, as we talked about mental health and some of those things, that information helps us to know how we can actually respond. I will tell you, from the standpoint of supporting all students, I personally like the survey we selected, so good job, Vince, because students are able to identify, and as we tease out data, we will be able to see, do our students who identify as trans or fit into the population of LGBTQIA, like, do they have a sense of belonging, and being able to differentiate that out, where with the DESE survey we weren't able to do that. So the answer is not much, but if you are interacting with members of the community, encouraging them to complete the survey so that we can gather feedback and make adjustments where necessary.
So a different group of folks who we may have more influence over, not me, but the royal we here, is staff. I heard you rattle off some numbers, and I would like for you to just tell us what buildings have gaps right now in responses to the climate and culture survey.
The high school currently is the building with the gap. We did not survey the ECC. That data that we received, so actually the student data is...
I'm not worried about the student data at the moment,
Data,
just the staff data.
Currently 30 participants, and when we say staff, it's all of staff, so custodians, teacher assistants, secretarial staff, anybody who walks in spaces that touch kids.
Okay. I recognize that there is concern about the culture from teachers. What means are there for them to take some responsibility to inform us of that?
Well, completing the survey is a great way to do that.
Is Ms. Huffman the only person pushing that out to them, or is there some role for the teacher associations or teacher leader? for that?
That's a great question. I did not
Okay.
consider that. Thank you.
And ECC teachers are being surveyed. I heard you say we're not surveying ECC, but that is students.
Students,
Okay.
correct.
ECC teachers are being surveyed.
And they currently have 77 participants out of the group. And
Okay.
yes,
Great.
thank you. Yes.
No further questions. Item 5.02, strategic plan update.
Thank you. Having some technical difficulties over here. So one of the things that we started this year as a result of feedback was the community roundtables with the board, and we held our first community roundtable. And just to kind of go to next slide, the rationale. So one, the feedback said that the community wanted to have more interaction, wanted to be able to share concerns, but also to see the progress that the district is making and with the newly adopted strategic plan. So the rationale for sharing the data, one, it is a requirement under MSIP 6. So we just talked about the climate and culture data, but it also is a part of continuous school improvement. The other piece is around transparency and accountability. So the data that I will share here tonight will highlight successes from the roundtable as well as opportunities and what the administration will do to address it. Next slide. So we had 30 respondents. We had approximately 60 participants. So we had a response rate on the survey of 50%. And you can see the information in regards to how they learned about the event and their participation rate. Next slide. So this slide talks about event satisfaction. So we had approximately 70% of the participants to say that they were satisfied with the event, and we had another 18% that said that they were very satisfied, and you see the numbers around dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. But I did take time to look through all of the feedback and the comments that were received to look for trends, and you'll see that information coming out. So one of the things that the shift to using SurveyMonkey versus Google is that you get these cute little things that pull out the words that highlight what our participants said they value from the experience. So the conversations, the discussions, really having an understanding of the strategic plan, and being able to come to the table in small groups to talk about the direction of the district. And then also to be with community members, because there has not been an opportunity for us to gather in spaces, but to have board members at the table to engage in the conversation, but also having members of administration to be a part of those conversations as well, to give additional insight or to answer questions that actually were posed during the meetings. So this is the big rocks. Thank you to all of my cabinet members who helped to compile this. We had lots of pieces of paper, and we went through and actually identified what were the big rocks based on the feedback that we received from the notes. And I summarized some of it because some of them, there was some overlay with them. But for our students, there really was an emphasis on balancing the traditional approach to education. So not necessarily losing sight of the importance of test scores and things of that nature, but ensuring that we're continuing to offer project-based learning, hands-on experiences that we offer as who we are as MRH. The other, which I found this one to be quite interesting, and it actually surfaced in a conversation that I had with the parent, is developing a better transition process as students leave the varying schools. So if a student is leaving second grade, and let's just say, for example, that student is supported through special school district or has a 504, how are we ensuring that that transition over is getting the adequate information and ensuring that those interventions and supports that were in place are actually transferred without loss in time for student. And then the other was around apprenticeship and mentorship, and then having a focus on trades. And this is something that Claude has talked about frequently at our board meetings and at other events where they exist. For our people, continuing to work on retention strategies, that has been a huge push. I will highlight that Dr. Ambrose Phillips has implemented choose and chats for staff, so she sits in the buildings and actually engages with those individuals to hear what's going well, what's not going well, particularly to have touch points for new staff, so that's critical to note. Growing representation in academic leadership. I wasn't quite sure what the comment was for that. I wasn't sure if it was talking about representation as in race, gender. That one probably requires some additional unpacking. And then providing emotional support for teachers. We know that the pandemic has created some trauma. And also, for me, the personal attack from legislature or anybody else on public education, and then expanding the mentorship program for new teachers to ensure that when we hire individuals, they are able to stay. So that's the sustainability piece. For our community, the big buckets were focused on post-pandemic engagement opportunities. I would say that this has been a strength in the past year. We have had our back to school fair. We have the community conversations with very focused conversations. We have the board roundtables, and we also have presence in a lot of the community events where individuals have access to us. And the buildings have also included additional touch points to engage families, which kind of leads into increasing access to schools for families as well. And I would say that the middle school currently is now welcoming parents in for like the expedition, so that's an exciting piece too. And the last two I think will continue to be work is bridging gaps with parents whose school experience has not been positive. I would definitely encourage families to complete the survey, but also attend many of the events that we currently facilitate to allow them an opportunity to actually engage and give feedback so that we can react to. And then improving communication is always an opportunity, but this particular bucket was around the pace and quantity of information. We'll be surveying community again, as Ed shared during his presentation for his program evaluation. And really, I'm interested in what they mean by pace and then quantity, because I know that some family members have multiple kids in multiple schools, so it can be a lot. And so getting a little bit more granular in that. For our resources, a lot of good big buckets came out. Partnering with local and regional businesses on a more systemic level, and then increasing familial access to schools. Leveraging expertise of alumni and funding. I wasn't quite sure what came out of that. And then eliminate consultants. We actually eliminated consultants when we brought on the new positions, so we don't have individuals doing the curriculum work as was happening before with some of the consultants, nor the federal programs work, because we hired a person. And I would say she's probably brought in more money than her salary. And then parent donations in Amazon classrooms, I do need to further understand that. So I don't know if that's creating a foundation where we can actually have donations that we can use to support some of district foci. So I think for me, it's really unveiling what actually the feedback that was provided for the big rocks and how we actually respond to that. And then for our health, sense of belonging was a common trend, and also increasing mental health resources and access to our students and staff. So those were the big rocks that came out of the conversations. Those are attached to the board agenda item. And next slide. So growth opportunities for the event. I am a very reflective person, so while I was looking at the things we did well, there were also some things that we need to do in preparation for the next board community roundtable. So one was increasing the time provided to actually gather thoughts and report out. So there wasn't enough time for substantial conversation because there were so many, some of the topics were so meaty that you really couldn't dig deep, which would mean either decrease the topics or look at a different method for actually engaging in conversation. Identify a more appropriate tool to gather table information. That one was actually mine. I put that in. I think initially when going into it and thinking about how the flow would go, I thought the tool would actually collect what I needed. And what it did was actually create more work for my direct reports. So sorry guys, but that will be an adjustment based on the feedback. So others also indicated that. And then just ensuring that the tables have the resources that we are looking at. So the protocols, ensuring that those are available for the tables, the priority area questions available to the table so that they didn't have to say, now what was the question again? So that was excellent feedback. And then One of the participants, while it wasn't throughout all of the feedback, talked about providing data regarding the measurable outcomes. And that one, we are still waiting for DESE around specific release of data. We can share data from our local assessments, but I think it's also critical to share with the community the data that we are being measured upon. So it has not been released. I am itching to share it. But we still don't have it. So the hope is December or January that information will become available, which will be available by the time we have our next roundtable. And then several individuals asked for childcare to ensure that more individuals can come. So as we talk about removing barriers, how might we do this? We got Key Club going back and some other things, so there may be some opportunities for that. And then someone asked, indicate how the board will receive feedback. I thought we shared that during the meeting, how the information would get back, but this is how the board gets the feedback. So they get the information that was provided, the full survey in its raw form, and then also a distilled version, which is being provided today. Next steps, provide distilled notes to the strategic plan champions, so they will get a copy of this. As was mentioned before, we are seeking individuals who are interested in being a part of our board committees, but they will take that information as they go through and actually begin to implement their portions of the strategic plan to see what adjustments and shifts we need to make, and then modify the community roundtable format to ensure that people have adequate time to really digest and have a good deep conversation, and then have a tool that actually makes it easier for them to put that out. And that also includes more time for reporting out. Table spent a lot of time having some good discourse, but felt rushed getting that information out. And then the last is to continue to implement the strategic plan and report results and updates. So we are not there yet, but we do have a website that's coming for the strategic plan that will have the metrics for monitoring, and then the actual strategic plan, if you click the link, has the action steps and the progress for that included as well for community on the website currently. That concludes the strategic plan feedback from the roundtable. I welcome any questions the board may have.
If any of us spent time reading all of the individual responses, which I did, we got a lot of really substantive feedback. I think one thing that we want to really prioritize for our next gathering is making clear what the objectives related to the goals are. Okay. That there seemed to be a lot of question about what is it that the strategic plan is trying to do, and we have defined that and articulated it, but I think we were looking at it at such a high level that those specific strategies could be more visible during those exercises, so that it's clear to people what we're working toward.
And just along those lines, and I think that this seat at the table thing was actually a good example of that, showing how we are implementing not just these sort of catchphrases, but what part of our curriculum does apply to us, what part of our surveys or whatever apply to it. That's right.
That makes sense. So more or less, as we go through those different pieces, because there is a climate and culture piece in the plan, giving them some very concrete examples of what that looks like and how we're operationalizing it. Perfect.
Additional questions, feedback? Thank you for presenting the full package of information, including those individual survey responses. That was helpful. Item 5.03, construction update from Mr. Holzer.
Okay, good evening again. I'll go through this quickly. While I do, my colleague, Dr. McGee, will potentially roll through the slideshow of the pictures from the week. I did update the memo this afternoon before the meeting with the most current photos and the most current data. So starting from the outside of the building, you might see that the brick has been expanding and the blue walls that you've been looking at as you drive by every day are disappearing. So we'll top out tomorrow. So the red brick that you see will be complete, and that big scaffolding that's bridging the canopy will go down. and you'll start seeing brick go up on that large concrete wall that's isolating the courtyard. While that's happening, we'll have the pavers going in down in the courtyard. Moving on to the interior of the building, you can see here we have ceiling grid, we have color on walls. We've been prioritizing office spaces because the arrival of our built-in and constructed office furniture is imminent, so we needed to prioritize the office spaces. So in the second here, you'll see all the carpeting in most of the offices is complete. We have ceilings in the gym and walls in the gym painted, acoustic panels going up, so it's now looking like an actual gym. Basketball goals go up in the next 2 weeks. Flooring starts early December. It's a flurry of activity over there. Here's our carpeting that's going in the offices. The building is almost completely sealed up. Missouri Valley Glass was out there yesterday and today sealing up the stairwell, the west-facing stairwell. And we have one big window to seal up on the second floor, but we've got to get equipment and all of the man lifts out of there before we put the glass in. Otherwise, we're going to have lifts in our instructional spaces, and that just doesn't work. So we are looking at mid-December to start turning over areas to the operations crews to start getting ready for move-in. We'll be coordinating the move of the student services office suite into their new office suites while we continue to tidy up other areas. This is a long corridor and the offices there. We'll have built-in casework is coming in the next 2 weeks. So there's so many activities happening right now, I can't get through all of them. But if you read that memo, that does a pretty good job. One of the things that we are really excited about, though, is getting that office furniture in so we can start moving in our student services staff, because once that happens, we can start working on the new classroom spaces down on the first floor next to the cafeteria. But we are looking at rolling into the end of the calendar year for completion of the spaces for mostly being able to occupy them, and then moving into the first part of the year for some of the ancillary areas like the new gym and the weight room and locker rooms. Wrestling room as well, excuse me.
Are there other items that are pushed into January besides those three?
We're trying to get everything done outside as well before the end of the calendar year, but January 4th, we're expecting to move into those spaces, and for the most part.
Just for transparency, we did have, Dr. Dietrich, Chris, myself, Cordigan Clark, and Trico had a meeting
This week?
Tuesday, thank you. Tuesday, just to talk about the deadlines, and quite honestly, to express frustration of the deadlines not being met, and what our expectations are, not only financially, and being very clear about what we're not paying for. So I think the meeting went very well. Dr. Dietrich actually sent a list of spaces he needed, and we also are partnering now with Navigate to provide some support at no cost to the district to really ensure that the scope and sequence of the remaining portions of the project do not go past the dates. Currently, the date that we are looking at for the Student Support Services Wing, I think, is potentially February, but with the new partnership, they have a better understanding of how you actually move the pieces around. For example, I learned a great deal. You can't put asphalt down after a certain time because apparently it doesn't work well with the weather, and so moving some of those pieces up so that we can expedite completion, and then also looking at the number of staff members that are actually, or subs, that are actually put in places, and whether or not we have appropriate subs, the amount of subs in spaces. So I do think that it was a productive meeting, and really being clear about what our expectations are as a district to ensure that we are not prolonging the continuation of the project, but ensuring that our students and staff have the spaces that are needed and made available to them. So thank you for your patience. We are pushing hard. Chris, anything else you would add in regards to our meeting or next steps?
No, I think we made it perfectly clear. We've had an incredibly productive last 6 to 8 weeks. We did express, as Dr. Jamieson said, we did express frustration over some of the scheduling items, but I do think that if we can maintain the pace of activity that we are currently undergoing, that we won't have a problem meeting this new set of deadlines. I will add, construction is a very dynamic and malleable process, and we're pushing very hard for these deadlines. And while we understand that our students, faculty, staff, community are also becoming frustrated with as we extend these projects, we do need to get this job done correctly, and we need to make sure that we're focusing all of our energies right now on supporting all parties to make sure that we can keep these deadlines intact.
Dr. Jamieson, I need clarity on what you just said about having the right number of subs. Do you mean teacher subs, or do you mean subcontractors?
Subcontractors. Okay. So I'm learning a lot. I think the question that I posed when I met was, how many subcontractors do you have in each of the individual spaces, because of the amount of work that needs to be done and thinking about where they need to be to get it done. So I asked the right question, but probably not the way that they were expecting. So we did have some support there, and the person was able to explain what my ask was and really make it meaningful. I would say, based on my observation, and I'm in buildings enough to see that I don't necessarily think sometimes we have had enough people in the varying spaces of the building to ensure productivity for the spaces. And I think one of the things that Chris did not mention is that they started having subcontractors work on top of each other to get the work done. Chris, you may need to elaborate on what that means. But.
Sure. So here's a perfect example of what that means. It's layering the trades, which isn't necessarily the most optimal or ideal for the tradespeople involved. However, we're at that point in the project. We don't have time for drywallers to finish before the tapers begin, and we don't have time to wait for the painters to start until the tapers are done. So what we have right now is we have the drywall hangers being pushed by the tapers, being pushed by the painters, and as soon as they're out of the way, the flooring goes down, and then we have the final coat of the paint that will go on after that, and then the furniture comes. So while that provides great opportunity to pick up time and schedule, it does cause some built-in inefficiencies. However, after talking to as many of these tradespeople on the job over these last couple of years, it seems like this is a growing trend. If you look around the region and you look at the projects, just due to the overall lack of tradespeople in our industry right now, in the industries right now, there is a shortage. So this is often how things end up near the middle to the end of the projects, where we're layering the trades. Dr. Dietrich and I walk the site at least once a day, sometimes twice a day or more, depending on what we're having to look at in that particular day. And we are doing our best to keep all of the people on site encouraged, recognizing the hard work that they are putting in, reminding them that the work they're doing is important. It's for our students, it's for our community. And I do believe that overall they appreciate that, and that it does help the overall morale of the job. This has been a long slog. We're pushing 2.5 years now on this particular site, and I think we're all ready to be done, everybody, but we also want to make sure that when we are done, that it's a product that we all expect and can appreciate. Do you have anything to add, Mike?
And I think you mentioned something about Navigate. Is that an additional entity?
It is, but not an entity that we are paying for.
Okay. It sounds like they're project managing some of this stuff.
Navigate's functioning as our owner's representative in conjunction with Dr. Dietrich and me. They have a more intricate knowledge of the inner workings of the contractual aspects of this and how we go. And in particular, it's going to be extraordinarily helpful, especially as we come into the end, because once the project looks done, it's not done, because we still have paperwork, closeout, as-built documentation, final cleanup, punch list, all of those intricate little pieces, and their expertise and knowledge in those areas is going to be extraordinarily helpful to us as a district, and I think a value add that we won't be paying for.
Even better.
Yeah, I was very sure of that. We weren't paying.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Item 5.04 will be our Prop E progress update video.
We're going to do a lot less ed this month and a lot more hard driving. I want to point out that Dr. McGee has kind of empowered me to incorporate AI into my daily workflow. So what I did was I told my editing system to make a video, and I supplied the clips, and this is what it came up with. I'm kind of impressed by it. It started out with the sculptors patiently waiting for their rightful return to the conference.
This should be fun.
The 80s graphics.
The skylights are very impressive. You can't really see the scene. They're all over the place. Actual doors on the elevators. Like Chris mentioned, carpeting is going down in rooms, tile in the hallways, right there. Those are lockers for the wrestling ring. That's inside the main gym. Restroom right inside the gym block. Electrical hookups out in the commons. A lot of them. Which is good.
Thank you, Ed. What AI program did you use?
It's on iMovie.
Item 5.05, our program evaluation for federal and state programs with Dr. Bouchard.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about federal programs and a little add-on for some grants as well. Seems to be a little hot topic this evening as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about Title I, Title II, and Title IV specifically. Those are the funding sources that we get for federal programs. Some of our goals for federal programs, we're going to talk about the overview of the budget for those three areas and our expenditures for those three areas and our future goals. Then we're also going to talk about the grants for last year that we received, just sort of an overview of some of the funding sources, some of the things that we're tracking through some of the incoming areas that we have. Then specifically some of the ESSER funds that came in. I know you all know that we've got some ESSER money that came in some different forms. And so we're going to talk specifically about the teacher retention grant that ended and the federal ESSER Grow Your Own grant that came in. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the upcoming grants we have happening for this coming school year. So, we receive funding for Title I, Title II, and Title IV programs. Title I, all of these programs are designed to support supplementary supports for schools. Title I specifically usually supports reading and math. We have those funds that are funneled to the elementary and the ECC, typically supporting anything that is in need that they design in their school-wide plans. They are both listed as school-wide buildings, which means at one point when they applied for school-wide, they had 40% or more free and reduced. They currently do not have 40% free and reduced, but what I've been told is that they're school-wide, and they're going to be school-wide until somebody tells us to not be school-wide, so we're going to keep them at school-wide. What that means is that we don't have to target very specifically students that in any form or fashion. It means that we're allowed to use the funds to help any child in the school that needs it. We don't have to just specifically target specific students. So that is actually a good thing. It offers a lot of flexibility, and there's a lot less monitoring that goes along with it. Title II funds are typically used for two things. It is class size reduction funds or professional development. And because in this district we do not currently meet any kind of DESI maximums in our class sizes, we use those for professional development funds. So we can't justify reducing class sizes that are already below DESI standards. And Title IV funds are typically used for any kind of social emotional needs that you want to funnel into those places. It could be used for science, anything music-wise, or just anything that's pretty much not reading or math. It can also be used for some technology needs as well. Title II and Title IV funds, because those are actually district-wide, you have to look at the entire district, so those are typically funneled into the areas of need that we prioritize, and the middle school and high school do receive a bigger portion of the Title II funds because their free and reduced rates are actually higher than the elementary and ECC as they stand. And we do, when the funds that we do receive for Title II and Title IV do go also to some of our non-public, which is Little Flower that's in our boundaries. And then we do have a neglected institution within our district boundaries that does receive funding through Title I as well. Our goals for last year were to really kind of sit back and look at all of the expenditures that we've been making and the past practices with expenditures, and making sure that we are looking at how we're using our funds and leveraging our funds to maximize the student support, and making sure that there's a sustainability for the programs that we're using those funds for, and making sure that we are able to sustain what we're doing with those programs. And one of the other goals that we met was to develop some processes to make sure that we're efficiently drawing down those funds between myself, the finance department, the non-publics that we have to coordinate with, and the neglected institutions. So working very closely with the finance department, thank you to Mr. Holzer and his department, and bearing with me in all my questions, but getting through to make sure that the expenses are allowable and that the processes are in place so that they get what they need and that we are able to track it appropriately for when monitoring comes in. Can you go back real quick? So we have two other goals that we are still watching and tracking. One of those is continuing to monitor our free reduce application processes, which the district has had in place, but due to most districts were in this place with COVID and getting people to fill out forms, and everything has kind of dropped off the map for a couple of years. We are seeing an increase. Thank you to Vince and his team for continuing to be on top of that and making sure that families are filling out those forms again. And then finally, one goal that's still in progress, part of which is happening this evening, but we'll continue to monitor and come back to you with, is looking at our program evaluations and trying to find the best way to update you all on the grants that are coming in and reporting those out to you guys so that you guys get all the information with what we're working on and where those things are going. The overview of the budget. So you have last year's actual allocation and the total expenditures along with this year's projected allocation and expenditures. Please do note that these do throughout the year fluctuate. The U.S. Department of Education reserves the right to up and down our funding all throughout the year, which makes the finance department and me super happy and angry all in the same moment sometimes. So we did get a benefit this year. They did actually, our original bypass allocation was supposed to be $20,000, which basically means that They take $20,000 out of our Title I funding and they give it out to the non-publics automatically. They actually reduced that and only took $13,000 from us. So we got an extra $7,000 back. So it was great, but it also happened like just last month. So it continued to mess with my budget totals, but we got $7,000 back, so we'll be okay. So we are continuing to plan to spend all of our allocation this year as well. Last year we spent part of our money on salaries. We spent part of our money on Title II money on our professional learning, as well as some monies for the neglected institution. We spent money on professional development supplies, educational technologies, some software, and again, the bypass funding that you saw in there. Title II funding also went for professional development. Title IV funds went to enrichment for some social, emotional for our non-public, and for my side for some elementary and ACC training. Our goals this year, one of the things with federal programs, in particular Title I, II, and IV, is that we get monitored. And our goal is to make sure that we are in compliance with the federal monitoring. And so one of the things we do to make sure that that's a little easier is that we make sure that we're not spending money on lots of things in lots of areas. It makes my life and the finance department's life a lot easier. So we are actually taking all of our Title IV funds and transferring them to Title I. And what that allows us to do is to take all of our Title I funds and our Title IV funds and just fully fund the 2 coaches, one at ECC and one at elementary. And that basically just means there's no stuff for us to track and inventory and run down, and no inventory invoices to have to hunt down when federal monitoring comes in and says, where's all your stuff that you bought, and have to go hunt all that down. So it really kind of simplifies the process for monitoring as well as for the finance department. And it really is just a 6, 1/2 dozen other funds that the building would have spent on stuff gets spent with local funds versus parting out the coaches and parting out the stuff. We will continue to monitor the free and reduced applications. Again, we just want to keep watching our rates and making sure we're hitting all of those numbers. And one of the things that we'll talk to you a little bit more, I get to come back next month because we get to talk about preschool and PhD. So we wanted to talk about claiming pre-K students for ADA, free reduced lunch forms, are involved with that. And so we actually went from 14 spots last year that we were allowed to claim that weren't using to we're up to 17. So that's why we like it when Vince claims more free reduced students. So that is something that we've been working with Dr. Williette on and been able to claim a little bit of. So we'll do that a little bit more next month. And then again, creating a program evaluation to make sure that we're updating you on all of the grants that are coming. Any questions about federal programs? I know it's very exciting. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about grants last year. So, and please understand when I'm counting grants, I do include Title I, II, and IV. Basically anything that comes in, and what I call, we have a submission program called EPEG. So if it's in EPEG, I call it a grant because it means I'm submitting it and tracking it. And these are the ones that aren't in EPEGs we're counting. But we are counting Title I, II, and IV in these counts as well. So last year we completed a total of 14 grants. A huge portion of those were from ESSER funds. We had some homeless funds that were coming out of ESSER, a little bit of money here and there. We had some Afghan funds, feminine hygiene grants, summer school expansion grants, reading support. We had the ESSER Grow Your Own Teacher Retention. We had some additional funding through ITEF partners, Lockheed Martin grant that ended last year, PLTW, DESI 50/50, the title grants we talked about, and we even had the elementary that applied for the tennis grant that funded their tennis program. And so one of the things you'll see is we're tracking the grants by purpose as well as by funding source, just so that we can see like what departments are getting grants, what buildings are getting grants, and who's funding them, just so we can keep track of where is all the money coming from. And as you can see, ESSER was a huge portion of the funding for us. And they keep sending things back out, which drives me and the finance department nuts, but we will take them. So, Two of the grants that we do need to talk about this evening in more particular are the teacher retention grant that came out through ESSER and the Grow Your Own through ESSER. Please note that is different from the state Grow Your Own that we did apply for. Again, it is separate and a little bit different. So the state Grow Your Own is the future grant that we got for this year. The federal Grow Your Own grant was, and the teacher retention grant, both were really like 2021 through 23 fiscal years. We spent the teacher retention grant, the majority, all but about $7,000 of that went to pay for building substitutes. And then the last $7,000, because it was written into the grant, was spent on updating teacher workrooms. And that was divvied out by the number of teachers per building, so each building got a portion of those funds to sort of update something that they wanted in their teacher workrooms. And that was something specific written into the grant and approved by the state. The Grow Your Own was originally for scholarships for seniors. Most of that money was not used and or utilized by seniors. And so we went back to the state, Dr. Amherst Phillips and I, and asked for an amendment. They approved it. It was still pretty late in the game, but we were also allowed to add any like non-certified staff that was maybe in school. Could we give them scholarships to help with funding their education? We were awarded $10,000. We were only able to spend $3,000. So that's also somewhat telling, I think, of the state that we're in. There's also not many people get their education degrees. And because of the way that the grant was written, it was written in a $1,000 scholarship fund. Our hands were sort of tied. So we did have to give some of the money back. But again, what is happening with some of these funds is that things that are not spent in ESSER are getting thrown back to the state, and then the state is turning around and throwing it back out in some different form. So I would expect to see some of those funds coming back in another form, probably in about 30 days. Teacher retention grant, we did survey what, we asked quite a few questions. These are just a couple of samples, but did some of these things positively impact your job satisfaction? The building substitute, people did feel like this did impact them. They felt like they could take off their work as the staff didn't. The teacher, as expected, buying stuff for teachers was not as impactful. These are pretty dedicated people who don't care as much about the stuff as they do about kids, so that was not really a strategy that seemed to work as well. So that was something that the state was also asking for feedback on what strategies you used that worked and what didn't. So that's the reason for some of these questions and what they're looking for as they move forward. Upcoming grants. So we have 25 grants in process. Actually, that's 26 now. These numbers are actually not correct because we got word just last week that we were awarded another grant. So we're excited about that. But we had 26 grants in process happening this year so far. We've had 13 that were submitted recently. 10 were not funded, and that should be 2 that are still awaiting word. And we have, I can't even keep track of the number right now that are out floating around that are sort of in process. So I have right around a list of 30 that I'm still trying to gather like when their due dates are in order to be able to push out lists to people to say if you're interested, go here to apply. I haven't been able to even have time to gather the list together for people. So we have, once a grant is submitted, I keep track that it's in process, somebody is interested in applying, and then when it's submitted, it moves down in my list, and then once we receive word that it's been granted, I meet with the finance department to make sure it's coded and tracked correctly. So it's been a huge process, but again, I think the data that we're seeing come back is pretty powerful from some of that as well. Any questions about grants?
Curious, what were the additions to the teacher workrooms? Like what? Was
it varied.
Equipment or was
yeah,
it
some of it was furniture, like
yeah.
updating, some pieces of furniture. Some of it was like coffee makers and, soda machines, things that the staff had asked for here and there. Again, it was $7,000, so it really was not a lot of money. And it was divvied up by building, so it just depended on what the building needs were. So. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bouchard.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Item 5.06, our technology program evaluation with Ms. Irwin. Dr. Irwin, excuse me.
Good evening, board, members of administration, community, and everyone else. I would like to give you an evaluation of and overview of our program in technology for last year, the 2022-2023 school year. I've been twisting that on my tongue all evening. I'm excited to present this information. This is my first program evaluation here. So I've been here just a little bit over a year and have been, doing the work, and it's been very satisfying, really hard work, but I'm really excited to show you what we've been working on in the technology department and what our goals are and what we're going to be doing moving forward. So just to give you an overview of what I'll be talking about in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about what the technology department really is all about, why we are here and what we do to help serve students and staff, the design, so really the bones of the department, how we kind of structure the way we do business, give you information, our stats, if you will, on who we are in terms of our human, our capital with our people, and the programs we use to help support that. And then fiscal information as well as the goals we looked at this year and worked towards and are working towards, and as well as goals we're going to meet and work towards in the future. So our program for technology, the district technology department, we oversee the network, the internet, our data systems, our end users, our hardware, our software. We're really here to support the learning of students and everything that encompasses. Technology is a ubiquitous part of classrooms nowadays, and especially after COVID, it touches every facet, I think, of everything we do, large and small. But really, the biggest part of what we're here to do is help support that mission, whether it's any sort of repair or making sure that programs are up and running. And to do that, we have to collaborate with all stakeholders, all departments, all schools. And so we can't be successful in what we do. It's not really just a strategy, but we have to be really purposeful with how we talk with and cooperate with and partner with those different departments in order to make sure that our missions are aligned so that we're keeping things moving in the right direction and serving our students. So, like I said, the design really to me is the bones of the program. If you wanted to divide our department really into 4 main groups, it would fall under these categories. The network, which is the internet, the infrastructure, so keeping things running, and that includes cybersecurity and making sure that our networks are up and running, but also making sure that our data is secure and private, and that students have access to the programs that they need to have access to, as well as staff members. Our data systems include student information, but it also includes our learning platforms and any sort of instructional programs that we use. And so just making sure that those are accessible to those who need access, and that they're also secure, but they're managed properly and they're up to date. Our device and hardware maintenance is a really important part, and I think that's the part that we see, or at least the people we work with on a daily basis, that's the interface that they see the most often. So just making sure that Chromebooks that the students are using are working, and that if they're not working, we make sure that they have something in their hands available, and that we have repairs done as quickly as possible, or that we're always looking to make sure that we have some sort of support, whether it's instructional, integration, or repair, or making sure that things are available, and that's the end part. Sorry. Whoa. Okay, so here's basically the breakdown of the tech department. Besides myself, I have a band of merry men, and they are just really they just make everything run behind the scenes, and sometimes the joke sometimes is, you don't necessarily, if technology's working well, you don't necessarily know it because it's working well. And so these gentlemen work really hard,
on a regular basis to make sure that we're all well supported and taken care of. And so if we wanted to break down into categories what those individuals are doing, we have Chris Baker and John Redden, who's also here helping broadcast this meeting. Those are our technology support specialists, so they're in the trenches working with staff members and students in the buildings. And David Zahn also does that here at the middle and high school, but he's really kind of our lead repair person, so he's really the gentleman who's doing a lot of the hardware repair and the fixing. And he deals with the smallest screws I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it's quite a skill set. I'm in awe sometimes. Jesse Devaney and Anthony Scordius are our data specialists. They deal with our student information as well as what gets reported to the state through core data and MOSIS. And then James Gardner's our IT manager. So he's the one who's making sure that data is secure. He's our information security officer. He's dealing with a lot of things with cybersecurity as well as E-Rate. I know that you've probably seen him present that before. And then handling our network. And then we have the primary platforms that we use, and those encompass not only how we manage accounts, but our learning management, our student information management, and then how we keep students safe in terms of accounts and kind of overseeing activity so that kids are safe at school. Okay. Good enough. Here's our fiscal information. So this is expenditures over the past 5 years. I'd like to thank Mr. Holzer for this, this information. As you can see, just over time, costs do continue to rise as years go on. Salaries increase, as do benefits, just because as years of service increase, salaries tend to increase. As do our purchase services and supplies. There was, as you can see, a more significant increase around the time of COVID, as a lot of districts went through, I'm sure, because of just needing to purchase things to help get us through that piece. And then a lot of those things have been appreciated, and the teachers enjoy using them, or they've proven successful in supporting student learning outcomes. So we've kept those items, but also the costs of things have gone up as well, or lead times and shipment and all the supply chains. Those things have made costs larger than in the past, as well as some of the exceptions that this district may have not had in the past. For example, construction, new spaces needing new technology that they might not have needed before. So the goals that we looked at last year were the following. The ones that we were able to meet were to define the LMS process and make sure that that was successful and complete. So at this time about last year, Dr. McGee was talking about us changing from It's Learning to Canvas. The tech department was also involved in making sure that the information, it doesn't seem like so long ago, but we helped with the migration of that information from that platform to Canvas, as well as making sure that the files were there as much as possible. There's never a smooth transition from one to the other, but as much of it as we could get over that we could, like moving, you know, some things might break here and there, but making sure everything was bubble wrapped as best as possible, but also identifying what groups needed training and making sure that those individuals have support. John Redden has also really stepped up in a leadership role and is a Canvas leader in the district, and so we've been able to leverage our people to give more of an instructional technology support that may have not been there in the past. We also upgraded our Wi-Fi networks, so we were able to replace the APs in the buildings and upgrade to the next Gen 6, as well as get some of the licenses to go with that so that we have more access points in the building and have better capabilities to connect. And besides that, the other goal we have been able to meet is, and definitely meet, is launch and expand Clever adoption. So Clever is a single sign-on platform. We have lots of different accounts, and it can be difficult for some of the students and even the teachers to remember all the passwords and log into things and have it written down, or which one did I use for that. So Clever makes it as easy as possible to make all those accounts in one particular place to where they can be rostered and students can go to that one platform and then reach their other instructional resources. So we were able to launch that last year, and then we've been adding resources continually so that students can go there and be able to easily get onto the other programs that they use, including Canvas. And other goals that we're working on that are in process, one thing that we were able to do was roll out a new ticket system, and that ticket system has given us analytics that we can use to make data-driven decisions within our department to try to improve processes. And so one thing we were looking at was improving our customer service within the department. So we decided to set a goal of 80% approval, and we were able to meet that goal, but we're also just trying to continue to raise the bar to make sure that as we serve our students and staff, that we're always doing it to the best of our ability and as, you know, as competently as we can, but also as warmly as we can so that we can solve problems quickly. Because people don't like when things are not working well, and they panic. Nobody wants their things to go down. So we're always doing that, and we look at that data monthly just to make sure that we're on the right track, and if someone is not in a good space with that, we can address that and talk with them. And then some things that I would say are not met, but are rather more in progress, is that we're looking at the partnerships and the assets that we do use, primarily software subscriptions, to see if maybe we can bring some of those down and maybe reduce some of those. So we're looking at usage reports, and are they making an impact on student achievement, and possibly reducing some of those subscriptions, thereby bringing down some of the budget. So that would be an in-process goal, as well as continuing to improve our data privacy agreements and our processes as outlined in MSIP 6. So, moving forward, the things that we're going to focus on in the department this coming year and beyond, we're going to look at the recommendations that the state puts forward for cybersecurity, as well as anything that we glean from any sort of phishing simulations or any other sort of recommendations on cybersecurity, and use those to improve the processes we have here, and keeping in mind what we have already written in policy. So we're going to make that a focus. James and I have been working on looking at that and then bringing in people for discussion and advice. We're going to continue to improve financial and operational efficiency. So as part of our resources in the strategic plan, find ways to optimize our spending by maybe bringing down some of those software subscriptions and really using the ones that are meaningful and impactful in the classroom, and consolidating some of the resources, maybe finding ones that do some of the same sorts of things, like a Swiss Army knife, and getting bang for our buck. And then coming up with a more streamlined way to keep track of our assets so that moving forward we can create a strategic plan within our own department to begin building a classroom of the future. So MRH has always been an innovative place for technology, and we would like to continue to build upon that success, but we also need to kind of be able to get a baseline of what we have, and we can do that, but we have acknowledged that we could probably clean up that process. So those are our goals, really small ones, as you can see. Do you have any questions?
Abby, back to the fiscal information
Yes.
slide, and I know you haven't been here for most of the years, shown. Obviously, this is a significant chunk of the district budget. Can you give some examples of what purchase services or expenses have looked like in the past year?
In the past year? Well, I would say that some of the support we had moving to Canvas was a part of that purchase. I think, Dr. McGee, that would have fallen under the technology budget too. We also have been working with, Instructure has a program called Learn Platform that we've been working with to take a look at the programs that we do have in order to see if we can bring down some of the costs. But besides that, I would have to get some more information. About that.
And is expenses where like student devices is captured here?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, that
Yes.
number makes sense then.
Yes, and so we are, right now, the students do have Chromebooks, of course, and our staff has Apple products.
Right.
We're not making any decisions based on that, but we are always looking at, could we maybe pursue a different brand of Chromebook or just something, we're looking at repair rates and all sorts of things. Is there anything we can do to maybe make it a little bit better to where we're not spending so much up front, possibly being able to maybe get a better long-term warranty on that so that if there are any breakages or damages or accidental damages, that it will be covered and then we're not paying out of pocket necessarily as much for parts and repair. So we're taking a fine-tune look. The problem is just in some cases technology is it's just expensive, and since we're one-to-one, it becomes difficult to try to find, where can we do the give and take.
Right.
But
right.
we do acknowledge that we do need to make a reduction, and so we're doing our best to try to find places we can make that reduction.
Sure. I think you've already mentioned it. Obviously, when the district made the decision, more than a decade ago to be on the cutting edge of, one-to-one technology and other ways that we've integrated technology into the classroom, it was novel. We were obviously in a day and age when there's a lot more infrastructure and kind of expectation. I'm particularly interested in, I don't think we're talking about cybersecurity, at least not at the K-12 education tables until very recently. And so wondering about if you can say a little bit more about what your hopes are and what sort of, just standards there are around cybersecurity that we need to be aware of.
I think that it would be beneficial. Well, I guess I should backtrack a little bit. The state of Missouri does have CS standards, computer science standards, that they're pretty general, but they outline at a grade level the sort of things that a student would be involved in terms of technology with the curriculum. I think that something that would be a good idea to visit is to look at a technology competency, meaning at each grade level, a student would be able to do this. So in kindergarten, you might be able to know what a mouse is or know how to log onto a computer and then build upon those skills or maintain those skills. Some districts do have that in place, but in terms of how it relates to curriculum, it'd be knowing those skills versus how it supports the lessons. With regards to digital citizenship, I think that needs to be brought in early on. There are some lessons I know that are integrated with that, especially in our middle school here. I am not as aware if that's happening at the earlier ages, but that's something that Dr. McGee and I could talk about.
Well, and actually my question wasn't related to students. It more around like what does the district sort of infrastructure need to, what are your hopes for the district infrastructure to protect us as a as a entity? I mean, that is your charge, right? You're not writing the curriculum stuff. You are helping to make sure we have the data systems and internet safety for
So
for all
one thing
of us.
that we had to work on for part of MSIP 6 and for our insurability is to have a cyber cybersecurity plan outlined, where there were certain items that we had to make sure that we had in place. And one of those things was to make sure that we had like multi-factor authentication, so having more than one way to prove that you were who you said you were. We have since had, we have a guest network and a production network, so for those who are monitored and managed by our district, those devices are on a production network, and for those who visit are on the guest network, and they are subject to the limitations that come with that. In terms of other programs, we use Gaggle to be able to monitor activity within students' accounts. So if somebody is, certain things if they come up that might be a safety issue, I know that Mr. Estrada and James and I would get a flag on that so that we can reach out and at least keep them safe in that way. But we also have used some vendors through Mornet, which is through the state of Missouri, to do some basic like endpoint protection, to where we're paying them to keep an eye on devices that are not managed through other means like Apple. Apple kind of, I'm not really that technical on things, but I know that at least with Apple and our Chrome, our Chromebooks, those are managed and less likely to have any sort of data breach.
But just so, is that something we can maybe bring back, I think, to give an overview of what we've done as a district, and then also looking at what our goals are? I think we can bring that back to the board. Thank you, Abby.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thanks, Abby.
Okay, thank you.
Item 6.01 is our October financial statement update.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. Good evening again. It's getting late, and thank you for staying, community. I'm used to folks wandering out around this time when we start talking about all the money, but I'm happy to share this with you. As we move on to our first slide here, I always like to recognize the contribution of our community. 86% of our funding is from our local sources, which is not only property taxes, but also our fee-based services such as Discover Club and preschool, and also our food service program for those students who are paying full price for their meals, as well as the adults that enjoy the food in our cafeterias as well. Our operating revenue is right around $2.4 million, and about 10% of the budget at this point in the year. As we come into December is when we expect to see our the first revenue from our local property taxes. So that disbursement happens sometime in the middle to end of December. It's usually a big chunk that comes in right there in December, and then as collections, those collections wane over the course of the year. So for the most part, our cash flow is negative over the course of the fiscal year, with the exception of December, which is when the primary bulk of those receipts are recorded. So Dr. Pichard did talk about grants. I'll put a few more numbers around that. She and I worked on this earlier last week. So all of those grants that she was talking about, and she's probably applied for more since then because she's applying for grants seemingly every other day or so. About $880,000 worth of grants were applied for, and of that, we've got about $276,000, or 31% of those grants have been funded. So that is phenomenal. I'd like to see that number a little bit higher, but gosh, we're really trying. So Stephanie, I mean, okay. Yeah. So one thing to remember about grants, though, is in a lot of cases, those grants are non-renewable. So we have to be careful as a school district that we're being mindful if we're using those grants to start up programs, that once that grant money is gone, we still have to figure out how to fund that program. And that often is a difficult decision. Do we continue to fund the program and allocate resources from elsewhere, or do we, is that a temporary program? So those are the things that we're mindful of and that we are always considering as we're looking to offset costs with grants. So expenditures, we usually spend, this is a great number, salary and benefits is the greatest expense that we have as a school district, and that shows our investment and commitment to our staff. Of our expenditures, 77%, as I said, purchase services are tracking as they were in the prior year. We're right around 25% or so. Same for supplies and capital purchases. Overall, our expenses are right around $7 million, 25% of the budget, and right on track with where we'd expect to be this point in the year compared to the prior years. This is a look at our operating fund balances, which is everything except for debt service. So the blue line represents the fund balance as a percent of expenditures, and the ending fund balance. So you can see here that we have a planned spend down. You'll remember last spring we approved salary increases for both our teachers and our support staff as we moved our support staff into a newly created salary schedule. That does a couple of things. It benefited our support staff greatly in that it made those positions more competitive in the region, and it also allows us at the administrative level to plan and budget better and more accurately as we move through the years as folks matriculate through that salary schedule. As you saw in the previous slide, our budgeted operating fund balances right now budgeted at 35%. We will be bringing a budget amendment in the next month or so that will adjust that number, mostly to account for some of the grants that Dr. Bouchard has been talking about. And one other item to mention on the budget, we'll be bringing the audited financial statements from the prior fiscal year as well with our audit team from KEB. Any questions? As always, the full version of the financial statements are attached to the agenda item in board docs should you choose to review them.
Thank you, Chris. Move on to item 7.01, our committee reports. Looks like we have a couple. I'm going to start with CBTF, Rachel.
CBTF, we split into subgroups. We have, CBTF is working to prioritize goals and also start the process of working towards them. So we have 5 subgroups: tuition reimbursement, Discover Club, staff needs, benefits, and staff work requirements. I am in the benefits subgroup. So we are looking at how we arrived at our current benefits and groupings and what our possible options are, and we're just starting to study options, and then we will all come back together in December and share, I believe, where we went for that. And then Joe's Place, you want me to do this as my final? Sure. I rolled off and helped roll Christy on, and we actually missed a board note because this was her second meeting. We did that. Key things to be on the lookout for: funding. Anybody who'd like to donate to Joe's Place, that's always an option. There is a December 2nd event that you should see pushed out over social media that is a possible fundraiser. We have 2 other big ones coming up in the spring and a little bit further in the spring. As always, Joe's Place, we review the program, any needs that they may have, our funding sources, our newsletter is being launched. We had openings. Please remember, we have this wonderful resource in our district. If you know of someone that might benefit, Vince is your person. Talk to Vince. And I respectfully rolled off, and will continue to support and love Joe's Place.
Sounds like you're going to miss it.
I am going to miss it. Great.
Well, we're happy to keep you from being assigned to all of the committees that meet in the same week. I have deferred our update from the Missouri School Boards Association conference until our work session. There were 3 of us who attended, myself, Linda, and Rachel. We all attended different sessions, as Dr. Jameson, so we'll provide a summary of our takeaways and findings. But I think, as Rachel noted, while we were there, it was useful. It is good professional learning. It is always eye-opening, and we might be giving it a little bit too much of a bad wrap at this table. But it's a complex circumstance to be in when you're working alongside people who do not support public education at a public education conference. So we'll talk more about that at our work session. Any other committee updates? We've got nothing else in board docs. Okay. And I just will note, strategic plan committee applications are open, so encourage community members to submit. We have 4 applicants so far. We need a lot more than that, so keep it coming.
Yes.
All right. Item 7.02, Abraham has a update from the student advisor group.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all this evening. My name is Abraham Blue, of course, and I'll be giving our report from our MRH PAL board report. So, but before I go into it, I want to first give some quick acknowledgments. This is my first time presenting as our PAL board president. I want to acknowledge Dr. Jameson, our superintendent, and everybody that works with her about the cabinets. I also want to acknowledge Ms. Whippacom, our board president, everybody that works with her from the Board of Education. So, my responsibility is to gather input, share information, and to provide transparency to students here at our school district. I want to first talk about our happenings, what is going on and what is happening. First thing we have here is our town hall meeting. We had our town hall meeting. We were also able to connect with the elementary school. We were also able to demonstrate and come up with our communicational model. And also we were able to establish our foundational norms and protocols. As I continue to go through these slides, some of these things will resurface as I continue. Next. So, our town hall meeting. Our town hall meeting was a great success. It was a great success. So, in the past, we had our town hall meetings. They would be inside the rooms, and we'll show the presentations on Zoom and things like that. This time it was different. We're actually able to have it inside a theater where students are able to come together and participate in our town hall meeting. Most importantly, PAL was able to deliver our construction update, which was led and toured by Dr. Diedrich, which was great and successful. The other photo that you see here, we were also able to represent, we was also able to represent ourselves, us PAL, so we always mentioned that day as well too. So the other photo is us PAL team being able to participate in our weekly meetings, talking about our decisions and things like that moving forward. Next slide. So this slide here, this slide is really important to me because soon when I seen this slide, the first thing that came to my head was this. It's called this process called PPO. It stands for the principles, the practices, and outcomes. So let me explain. So when it comes to the first one is the principle. The principle is the fact that we have the opportunity to go with Dr. Diedrich to visit the new building, look at the new facility, get a tour, see how things look, and see how things will be in upcoming bumps and things like that, which was fantastic. It's great. We're able to gather great information from that experience and put these things in notes. The next thing is the practice. Well, what's the practice? The practice was this. Us PAL board team were able to come together to highlight the most important aspects of this experience. We were also able to talk about what we think and what we wanted to put inside a presentation, which one of our PAL board members was able to take leadership in delivering. And that leads to the outcome. Well, what was the outcome? The outcome was what you see on the last slide, was during our town hall meeting. We had a very great individual. I actually do want to acknowledge him. Alex, he was able to make this presentation precisely and deliver this to our student body, which was fantastic and which was great. He did precisely and great. So you can also see the QR code that we do have on our next slide here. So you can be able to pull out your phone and look at the slide and see the fantastic job that he was able to accomplish. Our next slide is this part. Like I said, there was going to be some things that were going to resurface that I do want to mention again. The first one, of course, was our visit to the elementary school. Man, it was amazing. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a great experience. There were 3 takeaways that I do want to mention that that did happen when we did go to the elementary. The first one, the first 2 kind of connects to what the students said, and the last one kind of connects to how we feel as a PAL board. So the first one is this. They were able, this is what they said, they felt that they were able to use this as an opportunity to share the ideas about their school and not just keep these things in their head. So they had an opportunity to use their voices, one of the main key things of why we have PAL. student voice. We were actually able to hear that coming from the students. The next thing I want to mention is this. This allowed them to be able to work together and make change at their school. They said this, we get the opportunity to make change at our school and use our voices, which is fantastic as well. So the next point I want to mention is our third takeaway. We were able to build a connection with the elementary students. We were also able to reflect on our approach moving forward. I also want to mention towards the end, we went out to these little breakout sections. We were able to kind of gain a little bit more interaction with them. And I asked my group, my section, I said, what was your first initial thought when you joined this? And one kid said, oh, I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on. But, and I'm like, no, you're a leader. You're not in trouble. It's okay. So that was pretty funny. But, to be able to see their reactions, like 3 of them said that, but I told them, I said, you guys are leaders. This is why we're in the setting having these conversations, which was great. So the next point I have on here is us developing our system of communication. Let me explain how that works. So I had the opportunity to be able to deliver a model system of communication to my team, which we were able to modify, which will allow us to know our system of communication moving forward. So what is the system of communication? We went with a hybrid model. How does this work? Well, every one of us, high school students individually, will work as liaisons. We're working with the different schools, PAL board members, assigned to certain missions, getting the information and bringing it back to the team. But the difference of this is with the middle school. The middle school, they have a bigger PAL board team, so we will all work together, anchoring and going to the middle school, gathering information and what they say and things like that, and bringing it back to the rest of the group. So that's how the hybrid model works. And also, I do want to say that when it comes to elementary, they also have a bigger PAL board team too. So we might make some adjustments when it comes to that also moving forward. But pretty much this is our model system of communication. Of course, over time, I definitely want to get data to be able to see and go back and say, okay, is this system working? Do we like this system? I know data is key when it comes to these meetings. So that is key. So also want to mention our review course proposals. This is something that we were able to talk about a little bit earlier. We talked about reviewing course proposals. I had questions in my mind as that conversations being talked about. Most of those questions were being answered, so that was pretty solid. The next thing I want to mention is, lastly, is our social media presence. So how's that doing? So you're probably wondering. So when it comes to this piece, I do want to say, since our last meeting on the 19th of last month, I do want to say that when it comes to our social media presence, we have made 3 posts, 1 story, and we have 37 followers. Of course, use your phone. Please go follow us. We're telling everybody this. Please go follow our social media platform. And this is another important thing I do want to mention. I do want to mention that this in particularly, we do want to get more data over time and see how students are interacting with us and how we are interacting with the students. And I love all of this because we are setting that foundation, and I think that's important when it comes to us PAL, when it comes to our protocols, when it comes to our social media, when it comes to our relationships, building that with the students. We're setting that foundation, and we're hitting those key things, which is important. So that pretty much ends the rest of my presentation. I'm open for any questions or responses. Thank you.
What do you know about your social media followers so far? Are they mostly high school students?
Yes, most of them are high school students so far.
Okay. And I know we don't necessarily want to encourage ECC and elementary school kids to be on social media. Are you thinking about other ways to get storytelling and messaging out to them in other ways?
I will put a note on that, but yes, yes, I would love to continue us as a team to figure out more ways to be able to get more, like you said, like storytelling and those type of ideas, connecting with the elementary and all the other students that don't have access to that. That's something that's definitely in our minds as we continue to build this foundation. So I definitely will take note of that. Thank you.
What platform is that? I'm not.
This is that platform is Instagram.
It's
Abraham, it seems like y'all are doing quite a lot as the high school, PAL representatives. Are you feeling like this is a manageable amount of work that you're being, expected to do? It sounds like there's a lot of good collaboration happening across you and the 9 high school members, but just wondering about, as we explore this for the first time as a board, if we're setting reasonable expectations for you.
Yeah, I can say that things have been reasonable. We've been having support, of course, of our principal, Ms. Huffman. We've been having the support from Dr. Jameson. So things have been reasonable so far. I can't say as we continue to set the foundation, but I am aware that when it comes to setting the foundation of anything, there's going to be, you know, possibly some, you know, moving, shaking a little bit as we go through the process. So I definitely understand that, and I definitely am aware of that. But as for right now, I can say things have been manageable. I've been loving the experience. It's been great, and I really, really appreciate each and all of you. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else?
But just again, I guess when you go back to your group, could you maybe quiz them on what they want from us to make this more meaningful, or what types of information should we be providing them to help them decide, you know, where they want to focus their efforts, that sort of thing, so that we can maybe coordinate so that it's, you know, we can set goals, deadlines, you know, looking forward to sort of see how this grows.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just a few highlights in 7.03 for upcoming events. Snaps. Our high school band concert is next Monday. On December 1, the Mid-County Chamber is hosting the Christmas Tree Walk. That starts at 4:30. We will have a district presence, as always, at that event, so please do participate. SSD Governing Council will be meeting on December 4th. I will speak momentarily about board candidate filing, which opens on December 5th. Also that evening, we do have another community conversation happening at Schlafly. Do we have a topic for that one yet?
We do. I do not have it right offhand. Give me 1 second.
Well, I will note that the community conversation we had this week was very, very well attended. Oh, yeah, Ed. Yes, the topic. SSD support. So thank you, Ed, for pushing out so much communication about the one we had this week and also sharing that topic. I think it really helped with the participation. And it was a fantastic presentation from Vince and a community partner. So board candidate filing, 7.04, again, opens on December 5th, closes on December 26th. As I noted in our special session, we have 3 seats open, 2 for the typical 3-year terms, and 1 to finish out the term that we just appointed to. Of note, filing does occur at the St. Louis County Board of Elections. It does not occur in MRH Central Office. We will continue to proceed that way as long as the state allows us to. That is a distinct advantage for us because filing happens when staff are out of the building for holiday break. So the hours are there, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Filing will end at 5 p.m. on December 26th. Of note as well, for those candidates who decide to file on the first day, there will be a lottery conducted to determine ballot placement. So it is not a situation where candidates line up outside and the first one who goes through the door is the first on the ballot. Subsequent candidates who sign up after that first day will just be placed on the ballot in the order that they file. So if you do have questions about filing, Kat Norton is our resident expert, but the Board of Elections can also support with information about their facility and how that process works. So, any questions from our board about candidate filing? All right. We'll move on to our action items, which we just have a few tonight. 8.01, can I get a motion and a second for our construction change orders?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8.02, executive session motion.
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised status of Missouri on November 16, 2023 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Bolton?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Oswald?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Whitaker?
Yes. All right. Meeting adjourned at 9:39 p.m. We will move into executive session momentarily after we take a break.
Is that your daughter?